This is the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast.
Exclusively on the Hurrdat Media Network.
Tell it to me straight up.
Hello, and welcome into the Straight Up Breakdown Podcast, proudly part of the Varsity Network. I am Greg Smith. I've probably been doing way too many things over the last few days, so I halfway know where I am, halfway don't, friend. We're going to get things together. I will get my life together as we roll through this podcast today. I am very happy to be joined by a now friend of the pod because he's been back twice, and the senior NFL reporter and managing editor for the Draft Network, Carmen Vitali. Carmen, how are you?
I'm doing great. Also kind of in a bunch of different places mentally, even if I'm working from home, I'm still all over the place as well. So
yeah, it's interesting that, once you and I've worked from home for years now. We've had an office for a very little bit of time before, and then it went away during COVID. So I've mostly worked from home. That does not stop you from having to run around all over the place and then not know where you are after overbooking yourself.
Yeah, pretty much. And then there's been a lot of things that have happened with my former employer, and then also just getting used to my new role with TDN has been awesome, but it's definitely been almost like drinking from a fire hose in a lot of ways. So yeah. I've been scrambling these last couple of weeks to try and get up to speed, especially during such a very busy time for something called the Draft Network.
Right, which is interesting because that's in a lot of ways why I wanted to have you on. The craziness that is happening both for you, personally, professionally, also with the league that you cover, the NFL, is exactly what we kind of wanted to go into. But what's even more interesting that we could not have planned for is that you had big news with your former employer, like you alluded to. And every week we have our first benchmark segment of the show, and that's called Coach Speak, where we give you something that a coach, player, or talking head said, and then we give you the straight up breakdown of what they meant.
Coach Speak to real talk.
And this week comes from Bruce Arians when we had big news about him deciding to step away from the Bucs head coaching spot, where he said, quote, "I have spent most of the last 50 years of my life on the sidelines as a football coach in one form or another. Today, I have made the decision to move from the sidelines into another role with the Buccaneers front office, assisting general manager Jason Licht and his staff. I love football. I love the relationships, the strategy, the competition, everything. It has been one hell of a ride, but I know that it's the right time for me to make the transition."
Let's break that down.
Carmen, what did he really mean by that?
Well, BA has always been a guy that you can actually kind of take at his word. He's probably one of the least big or the smallest offenders of the coach speak. I don't know what you want to call it, trend, epidemic, whatever it is.
Right.
You can pretty much take him at his word. But I do think that, this was kind of his plan all along in a lot of ways. He talks a lot about succession and how he wants to set up his guys. He's done that from the very beginning, talking about the staff that he was bringing on, bringing on Todd Bowles, who was a former head coach, and just he wants to lift his staff up and set them up and help advance them in any way that he can. And this was his way of doing it. And it's funny to me just because he's always been a guy also that kind of takes things into his own hands. And he knew that stepping away this time, it made it so he could guarantee that Todd Bowles would be the one to take over. You're past the major coaching cycle or coaching hiring cycle, rather. You're past the March 1st deadline to have to even abide by things like the Rooney Rule. Now, the Bucs did hire a minority candidate as their head coach, but the Rooney Rule states that you need to interview at least 2 minority candidates for each head coaching vacancy. And they were able to kind of just circumvent that whole process and get the guy that they wanted, who, hey, also happens to be a minority. And
Right.
That's not something that Bruce obviously really, he's been an advocate for minority advancement in the coaching ranks. He was the Bucs were the only team with all 4 coordinators, 4 coordinators, including the run game coordinator, but all coordinators being men of color. That's the first time that's ever happened in NFL history. And it was something that Bruce took a lot of pride in. So setting Todd up at this point, knowing Tom was coming back, knowing he was going to have a loaded roster and a much better situation than he had previously when he was in New York, you can pretty much take Bruce at his word. You can take Todd at his word too, for that matter.
Right. Yeah. And he had some interesting things to say kind of in the opening press conference today. Both of them did. And it's funny because, we used him for the coach speak, but you are correct in saying that. First of all, I don't think he's ever been used in coach speak and we've had repeat offenders in that segment because you can really take him at his word. What I really found, I guess I don't know, what made me happy about the situation, I guess, is that Todd Bowles got to be in a good situation. I think that one of the things that kind of pops up a lot with minority candidates is that we kind of get those teams that you're like, man, is it even possible to succeed in that situation? Right. Give us the Texans. But instead, you get the Bucks and you're like, hey, this is a situation where we know at the very least they're going to be competitive. They'll be better than that, but at the very least, they're going to be a competitive football team. And to me, that just really made me happy to see that be the case.
Same. I mean, that was the biggest thing where, I am a big fan of Todd Bowles. I have been since I met the man 3 years ago, working for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And he deserved this. He deserved this shot. He deserved the shot in an environment that was going to allow him to succeed, because I think that there was a lot of stuff stacked against him in New York when he took over the Jets head coaching job. And I think that that's very evident now in hindsight when, he leaves, doesn't have, he doesn't go out on a great note by any stretch of the imagination, but then you see what's happened, in the ensuing years, the Gase years. I mean, Robert Saleh seems to have gotten kind of a little bit more of a handle on the Jet situation. They're doing some good things this offseason with the new GM, but you saw that it's there was just not an opportunity for Todd to succeed there. And he did a lot, honestly, for what he was given. And I think that that's become very readily apparent these last couple of years now that we can look back on that time and see what's happened since. So I couldn't be more excited. I know that every player that's gotten to know Todd, every coach that's gotten to know Todd just believes in him 100%. And he has a very unique and signature way of going about building these relationships. And I just think it's so well suited in the head coaching position. And I cannot wait to see what he is able to do with this roster.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a situation for a number of reasons that people are going to be paying attention to. But I guess one of the things too that I wanted to make sure I asked you about, because to me it was and I'm way more on the outside looking in. So I know the answer is yes for me. Was it a surprise at all that Arians decided to walk away right now?
I don't think so, because I think that there was a sentiment that when Arians was done, that Todd was going to take over. That was the hope, at least, that they were going to be in a position for this to come to fruition. And I don't, it might have been kind of sped up by just the circumstances in which the Bucs roster was built. They're built to win now. And again, Arians didn't want to leave Todd with a rebuild. He didn't want to leave him with something that, was not a good product or was not a promising product, at least. So I think, it was one of those things where this was kind of planned all along. Maybe the timing wasn't exactly what they had been initially in mind, but I don't know that anybody is really surprised. Maybe they're surprised at, like I said, when Coach Arians decided actually, with the timing of it all, take the step back. But no one is surprised that Todd is the one that's taking over, and Todd is the one that has been thrust kind of into this role. And I think everyone is really happy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you just can't get away from the Bucs, even though you transitioned into a new role at this point. But it's funny. I mean, listen, we all got to have our areas of expertise, right? You can still be.
Well, I was, when Bruce announced it last night, I put out a picture of the very first time I sat down with Bruce and had a one-on-one interview with him. And I built such a good relationship with him, and he allowed me to be around these guys for the entirety of his tenure. And I got to know Todd really well, and I got to know a lot of the other guys on that staff. So yes, I'm out of the building, but those relationships remain. So it's just kind of now it's more like seeing your friends win. And that's really, really satisfying. So even if I'm not with the Bucs, I will always be rooting for these guys. And I just can't tell you how grateful I am to Bruce Arians for letting me just hang around and not telling me to F off. And
right. That's always a positive.
Just getting to hang around and learn from these guys. And my career wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for that. So.
Absolutely, which is a perfect segue because I want to continue talking about you. So you in this new role that you have, I want you to explain what it is right now that you're doing with the Draft Network before we get into kind of so many things that are happening around the league right now.
Yeah, everything happened really quickly. So I took over right before the NFL Combine, and I went down to the Combine with the Draft Network. And so I was producing content for them, which I will continue to do. I've taken a step back from content right now because I've started as their managing editor.
Okay.
So I'm in charge of the
Congrats.
content arm. Thank you. I'm in charge of the content arm right now, working with some awesome guys and girls that, just have some tremendous content, some tremendous ideas, tremendous perspectives. And I get to kind of make it all look pretty and put it on the website right now. But I have, and I also have, a couple podcasts in the works, a lot of content coming once I kind of get my feet under me as far as being in charge of people for the first time in my career. It's been like an interesting transition, but there's so many cool things happening at TDN. And I was so excited to help grow this company because I just believe in it wholeheartedly and believe in like the uniqueness and something, they're filling a hole, which is hard to do in this industry because it's so saturated. But I think that the transparency in which they take, former NFL scouts and show you the entire evaluation process. That's what we do. These guys are evaluators. They're evaluating talent, but then we're opening up the curtain and showing you, all right, yeah, this is how it works. These are the kind of discussions these guys have. We obviously don't have an allegiance to a team, so it makes it a lot easier, and we don't have any secrets. So it's such a cool concept, and I'm really excited to be a part of it and to help grow it.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that it's funny because I've followed the Draft Network for a while. It's kind of on social and just seeing everything, and it always just looks so cool. Like I think that I'm certain that that's on purpose, that is a strategy. But I think that that's something that catches people's eye, right? But also with that, and you mentioned kind of getting to go down to the Combine, right? Was the first thing that you kind of went through. So what was that experience like going to the Combine? Because I've talked to players about it, and they say because Nebraska just had their pro day, and we talked to a couple of guys from Nebraska that were there, and they were like, "This is totally different than what we think of when we see on TV as people participating in it." So as someone covering it, what was it like to be there in it, covering it, versus what you thought it was going to be like?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go with the Bucks as well. So this was, at least I kind of knew what to expect. What was new to me was the fact that I wasn't focused on one team. And so it was almost like there were so many possibilities. There were so many storylines. It was almost paralyzing, to be completely honest, but it was really cool to then that's kind of like your introduction for a lot of people to these prospects. And it's very long days for these guys. I mean, they have media in the morning. Most of our media sessions started at 8 a.m. and there were podiums set up. There were multiple guys going simultaneously, which is where it comes in handy having, multiple writers and stuff for TDN that were able to kind of gather all of the content. But then these guys go straight into meetings with all the different teams, and they're being asked all these questions that it's a very extensive interview no matter what team you're going into, and you're going to get asked just random stuff. You're going to get asked, the same things over and over again, but there's going to be curveballs too. And then the testing starts later in the week. So this is all in the beginning of the week. And you're going through these, 14, 16-hour days back to back to back. And then you're expected to have like the best workout of your life, at the end of the week. I've never gotten a good answer as to why they do the testing at the end of the week versus the beginning, because I feel like that would make more sense.
They should flip that.
Yeah, like in my brain, but then I guess, it's also kind of one of those gauntlet things where you're putting these guys through a lot to test, their mental capacity and test, kind of their fortitude. Mental fortitude is probably a better way to put that. But it's from covering the perspective of covering it. It's also just kind of like there's so much to cover. There's so many guys to get to know, but you do get a chance to ask these guys a lot of questions one-on-one. A lot of teams, every team is there. Most coaching staffs are all there. So then, there's also like the unofficial part of it where Indianapolis is a small town, and I think everyone is in agreement that they wanted to stay there. But you run into these guys then after hours, like when they get off to have a drink or they're out to dinner or whatever it is. There's only so many places you go in Indianapolis. So that's where a lot of, just some of these backdoor deals get done, some of the stuff that happens. And it's a very valuable time from someone that covers the league. to get a lot of, the stuff out of your sources and all that kind of stuff. So I love the combine every year. I look forward to it.
I can tell, like, you're very excited about it, like, which is great.
Yeah, it's so much
But the
fun.
thing is what it kind of reminds me of, and I don't know if you've ever had to do this, like, it sounds like Big Ten Media Days on steroids. Because that's a lot of what that is like, except for instead of, the amount of teams in the NFL, there's 14 teams in the Big Ten, and there's only a handful of guys from each team versus and so it's just like everything is bigger. It is the NFL, so that makes sense. But on the combine note, the one thing that comes up all the time, and maybe this is a more of a media thing, but I feel like people go to this place. Did you get the cocktail sauce at St. Elmo's Steakhouse?
So yeah, I got hazed with that actually, but it wasn't at the combine. It was when the Bucks played Indianapolis, or played the Colts in Indianapolis this past season, and I traveled with the team. So I was there, and I was lucky enough to join. It was actually Jake Arians, Bruce's son, and his wife Shelby. They brought me along to dinner at St. Elmo's. And I had never had, like, the first time I'd been to the combine, I just kind of avoided it. I'm not a cocktail sauce person as it is. I was like, I don't need that, whatever. So I didn't have a chance to try it. This time I did, and I was sitting at a table of like 14 people, and they were all like, banging on the table, like, try it. And I was just like, all right, I guess. Like, and then sure enough, I took one bite, and I was like, what is this? And I don't want to ruin it necessarily for anybody else who's going to get hazed, but I do feel like it's almost a indie hazing, a combine hazing. But some people genuinely enjoy it, and I really don't understand those people, quite frankly.
To be honest, and I have had it as well. I thought it was fine. I don't want to hate on it. But it's also a thing too, where like, and this happens with all sorts of things, right? Where when you hear so much about something and how cool it is and how great it is, and then you have had it like maybe like much later, you end up in a situation where like, okay, did it really live up to the hype?
It didn't live up to the hype, right?
Yeah, we all have those things, right?
I will say that St. Elmo's as a whole, though, did and has since. I've been a few times since, but that time that I tried the shrimp cocktail, I was actually in the basement wine cellar, which they call Peyton's cellar, because whenever Peyton Manning comes to dine there, that is where he eats, like at that specific table in the wine cellar. So that was really cool. That was that lived up to the hype. I didn't even know that existed until we got to sit there. So that was really, really cool.
I've been there and had no idea that existed. So
no one knows that it's down there.
So what you're telling me is that whenever I find myself in Indianapolis, the person to go with is you. I need to go with you so that you can get me into Peyton's cellar.
I had nothing to do with getting into Peyton's cellar. I think that had much more to do with the Arians family.
Fair, right? And another thing that like kind of the other reason I wanted to talk to you too is that, man, what a wild NFL offseason. And I feel like just saying that is the understatement of the century. And that this feels like, and I'm not the only person to say this, it feels like the offseason for like the NBA or what Major League Baseball kind of used to be with their offseason, where the NFL for years and years is known for not having many trades. You kind of had you had free agency and people moved, but it was not to the magnitude of what we've seen this particular offseason. So I kind of want to start here. Of all of the things, and this is tough to narrow down, but of all of the things that have happened this offseason, for you, what was the one that kind of made you sit up the most and go, oh, okay?
Yeah, gosh, that's really hard. It probably had to be Davante Adams, just because, I mean, there were rumors of the friction, whatever, but it's like, you figure that Aaron Rodgers comes back, like, why isn't Davante going to stick around, right? And not to mention, like, I don't know, the Packers don't know how to draft receivers, so they have to get them in free agency. So I would think that they would want to hold on to their stars. I mean, as a Chicago Bears fan, which I get to say now, I've been in hibernation while I was working.
Right. You're back. I'm so glad.
I'm back. I don't know that it was a good time to come out of hibernation, but I'm back nonetheless. That's a different discussion, but I was not sad to see that breakup happen, but I think that is a testament to kind of what was even happening. And the fact that Aaron knew that they weren't going to re-sign Davante, or that they were going to trade Davante. So it was just, the whole dynamics surrounding it were very interesting. I think just this, like, every offseason, I feel like we're saying it's the wildest offseason, right?
Yeah,
and I think
true.
I think it's true every time. I think
Yeah.
it levels up every year. And I think that that's so interesting because you likened it to the NBA and Major League Baseball to what it used to be. Well, the NBA and Major League Baseball have soft caps. So it's very interesting to now see this in the NFL where you have a hard cap and you have to fit guys under it and you have to get super creative. And I think that like it has to be maybe a domino effect of these front offices really getting creative with how they're structuring contracts. And they're giving guys more guaranteed money. They're giving them, signing bonuses bigger than ever before. But you kind of have to stay competitive, right?
Right.
And it's just a very interesting domino effect that has led to, these just wild off seasons and the keeping up with the Joneses among all these different positions. First, it was, just quarterback. And now you see the receiver market blow up and you're wondering what the next, kind of main position group is going to be. Offensive line is kind of teetering there too.
Right. Yep.
But I would love to see the defensive guys get in the mix here too.
Right. Let them get their cash.
Let's get them the bag, please.
Right,
like they're very important.
They win championships, I've heard. That's what
they do.
Right.
I am a very, very big proponent of that, having been a firsthand witness to that being the case at one point.
Right. The one, it's so funny that you use the phrase level up with the off season, and the one that sticks out to me is Married to Someone, that her song was called Level Up. Right? Level Up. Yeah, look at me. I had that song stuck in my head all week, like random.
Well, now it's gonna be stuck in my head today.
Good. It just won't be me suffering through that. It's not really suffering. It's a great song. Sierra, if you don't know who I'm talking about, married to Russell Wilson, who was traded from Seattle to Denver. That one, and while we had heard about the friction between, and it has friction, kind of hurt feelings, like the potential of him being traded, like maybe he wants out, maybe he doesn't, but there wasn't ever really like this huge like public declaration that I want out. And so it was always kind of looming out there. Plus, we knew that the Broncos wanted to do something, right? And that they really needed to do something when it came to they definitely needed to do something when it came to the quarterback situation. And to see them pull that off after like missing out on the whole Aaron Rodgers situation because they wanted in on that, which is a whole different discussion as well, that to see that happen and for them to get a franchise quarterback in Russell Wilson was a really big one for me. Like I was like, okay, like they're kind of doing something here. And I thought that was, it's going to be very weird. Like even seeing the Photoshops of him in a Broncos jersey is just kind of jarring, but I think it's going to be cool to see it all kind of work out.
And I mean, I think they put some good pieces around him too. And they've very quietly built a very capable roster, capable of contention. And it, like you said before, they needed to do this to keep up with that arms race that is the AFC West. Yes. It's insane. And I think that was really funny about the whole Tyreek Hill thing, where people, I think, jump to the extreme of like, oh, this means the Chiefs or whatever. I'm like, the Chiefs aren't falling off. Like you've got plenty of weapons still. You've got the ultimate X factor in Patrick Mahomes, and then you've got a really creative play caller and offensive mind in Andy Reid that did well before Tyreek Hill, and he can do well after, and he's still better off than he's been in a lot of points in his career with the supporting cast that he has. So it's very interesting that I weirdly though, like I don't know, I kind of thought that Russell Wilson just kind of fit, like. Yeah. I was seeing the jersey swaps, I guess it was kind of jarring, but I looked at it and I was like, I don't know, this kind of works for me. I don't know. So we'll see. I think it's just interesting though that the Seahawks have just kind of embraced this sense of rebuild now. Like that's it, they're out. Like I mean, the defense had started to crumble, right? And the offense then. So it was just like it was time, I guess, and every franchise needs to go through it. But it was 0 to 100, or maybe 100 to 0 for the Seahawks, real quick.
Which is weird. Like it's so like when you decide to, and this is just across sports, it is always fascinating to me on when you decide to actually pull the plug and say we're going to go into full rebuild mode. No one really wants to do it, right? But it is,
and no one outwardly says that they're doing it.
Yeah, no one's going to outwardly. Yeah, no one's going to. Yeah. Well, we just need to stop for a couple of years and then we'll be back. Yeah, no one really says it that way, but it's essentially what you're doing when you try to go like the opposite of less need and really go ahead and accumulate picks, right? Like that's basically what they're trying to do. But you also still have like Pete Carroll, like you've got to figure out, like, okay, I assume like he was consulted on this and knew that they're going to go ahead and go this way. But it's always just fascinating to me when franchises decide like, hey, we're going to go ahead and go a full rebuild mode and kind of see, because it's also tough. It's tough on fans. Like it's just tough all around. And on the one thing that I think that never gets talked about those rebuild situations is the guys that are still good and are left over on that team.
Oh
right?
yeah,
like
sure.
It's like we don't want to be out here losing all the time either. Like it's just rough.
I mean, even my first couple of years in Tampa, where it wasn't necessarily a rebuild mode, but they weren't very competitive or successful. And like, it's not to say that there weren't good players on that team, those teams. There were good players on those teams. And I think that Jason Light and his staff do a really good job in developing players, especially later round draft picks, and they turn them into these really well, like these starters essentially, and guys that have commanded a lot of money elsewhere for their second contracts. If the Bucs even let them get away. But like, because of that, they have an influx of talent that's come out of the draft a lot of these years that they weren't very good or very competitive for one reason or the other. And you feel for those guys so badly. I mean, like Gerald McCoy is one of those guys too that comes to mind, where he was, kind of his exit was a little questionable or whatever it was, but he exited right as Bruce Arians came, and he didn't get to enjoy the fruits of any of his labor. And he was dominant a couple of those years.
He really was
for the Bucs, and on that defensive front. So the front of defenses too that weren't. I mean, after seeing a Todd Bowles defense, I was like, oh my God, everything was so vanilla before.
Right.
I shudder to think what someone like Gerald McCoy would have been able to do in a defense like this. So, or like that one. I keep saying this and I keep saying we, because it's still a hard habit.
It is a hard thing to break. Like I'm sure you'll be like 2 months from now, it's gonna slip, and you're like, oh man, damn, I did it again. It's crazy too, because like the wild AFC West, and I tweeted out like a couple of weeks ago, I forget after which crazy move, that we just need a Hard Knocks, like where we just cover just the AFC West, and we just let them go, or we just like the Monday night games can be reserved like just for the AFC West to rotate.
Like every AFC West game should just be primetime in some capacity.
Yes, like
we all want to watch it. The entire country wants to watch this.
There's enough of those games, right? Like if you really want me, and I'm an anti-Thursday night football person, so like if you really want me to watch those Thursday night games, stick one of those AFC West games on there, and I'll start watching.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. The only thing that they're going to be limited by is the 5 primetime limit. Each team can only be on primetime 5 times. But I'm like, no, I think we all want the looking glass into the AFC West, and we like none of us can get enough AFC West content. For good reason too. I mean, it's just it's insane. And all of the guys that these major moves that happened this free agency, it was all guys going from the NFC to the AFC.
Yeah, that's
so my only deduction, which is again going to bring it back to my former team, but I just think everybody's scared of Tom Brady. So Tom Brady comes back out of retirement. Everyone's like, see ya, NFC. Like, just let this man have it. We're gonna go to the AFC and hang out and fight to the death. Like,
I'm gonna let you have that one. Like, maybe that's how that went. I don't know, but it is strange on how there was just so much movement to the AFC, and there's all of these like seismic moves within that conference. And we talked about the West, but I got to go there again, because the Tyreek Hill thing, and you said something interesting, I thought, about like how I think that they do believe, the Chiefs do, that they'll be able to kind of make that work, because you have a like legitimate generational quarterback, and then you have one of the best offensive minds ever in Andy Reid, who's Eric Bieniemy as well. And so, but I think one thing that NFL teams also really believe is that, hey, we drafted that guy in a lower and not a first round pick, and we got him to be where he was. Like, yes, he was very talented, but we helped him along, and our system helped make that situation right, so we can find another guy. Like, I feel confident saying that NFL teams really feel that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they continue to shape that roster.
I mean, yeah, and I think that you have to think that way. Especially, and I think that the fact that they made the trade, they got all this draft capital back, is a testament to the fact that they have so much faith in Brett Veach and what he can do in the draft, and who he can bring in, and who they can who the next guy is that they can develop. I'm not saying that it's a deep receiver class, but I don't know that the next Tyreek Hill is necessarily in there. But at the same time, you don't necessarily need a Tyreek Hill to make that offense hum. You need, you need a vertical threat. You need a guy that can stretch the field, but Tyreek Hill was by no means the only guy that needed to do that was able to do that, or that is able to do that. And you've got all those short to intermediate routes locked up. You've got the reliable guy in Travis Kelce, who maybe has lost a step, but not really. And him and Patrick Mahomes just have an incredible chemistry. You got Mecole Hardman, you got Juju Smith-Schuster now. It's like you got all these guys that I think you're going to be fine.
I don't. No one's like pouring one out for the Chiefs here,
right? Exactly.
Right? We're not. Like, no one's like really like upset for them.
No.
And so it's fine. You know who you should pour some out for? The Bears and Bears fans. Like, and so I'm definitely not letting you out of here without like talking about them. Like,
I knew it was coming. I know it's coming.
Why are they not like trying to help Justin Fields out?
Because I think that they're also embracing this whole rebuild mode, and you just kind of want to taper the expectations on Justin Fields, I suppose. But Chicago is such a tough market, man, and they don't have a lot of patience. And the thing is, like, they understand the game enough to kind of criticize it with some merit. I think Chicago's like that. I think Philly's like that. Yeah. As rabid as those fans are, but. It's this balance that I don't know. I mean, I think that Poles is being smart. He's not making moves just to make his mark as the GM. You know, he's really trying to think this through and make sure that they're set up not just for this next year, but you know, in years to come. Clearly, I think the Bears are legitimately at least 2 years out from being in contention, and that sucks with Justin Fields because you're developing him as a quarterback. But then again, he's not going to be under a lot of pressure this year. I mean. He might be under a lot of pressure this year because that offensive line is not squared away. Right. But like he's not under a lot of pressure to perform this year because no one has any expectations of the Bears at this point. So you can kind of make sure that he's got the mechanics down. He's really understanding these systems, and you can take your time with him and Matt Eberflus's new system and kind of get everybody up to speed without there being a ton of pressure or expectations around it. So I think it's not the sexy, you know, off season that you want to have. It's not splashy. It's not particularly fun. It's, you know, like it's coming from a content perspective too. It's like, what the hell do you write about when it comes to this team that you got a quarterback, so you can't growing up, I was just used to like, oh, let's go and see who the Bears quarterback could be because they don't have an answer there. Well, they have an answer there now, which is a good problem to have. But then you also, you know, you didn't do anything in free agency in the first couple of waves. You don't have a first round pick. So it's like there's not a lot, and it's like I said, it's not sexy, but it might work. It really might work. And I think that we need to have. You tried
to pitch me. I listen to Faith. We'll see.
I'm pitching
I don't
myself
know.
at the same time.
Right. Like I'm not just pitching you; I'm pitching me too. Like I think it is frustrating. I'm with you. It is frustrating. Is a really good word for this because. When they got Justin Fields, we were so excited. Like so many people were excited about that.
Yeah, you want to play with the shiny new toy right away.
Right away. And you want to see them then like put him what like everyone would feel like is in a position to succeed, right? And how do you do that for a quarterback? It gets some big time offensive linemen, like you know, they just like Cincinnati just did for Joe Burrow, right? They signed him a big time offensive lineman. He said, I'm going to protect you from day one, right? Or you go and you get some big receivers, you don't let your receiver go. To then be able to catch passes from said quarterback. Like it's just frustrating. Like it's just really tough.
I know so it
patience, I guess, is a virtue. And we'll see how it goes.
Let me ask you this. Would you rather them have done that, but then had to, as a result, neglect the defensive side of the ball and then have this amazing offense with absolutely no defense? And then you're still not competitive. And so now you're wasting the offensive side of the ball. Or are you? I guess that's my question is like, would you rather have built up that side of the ball and then not have a defense so you're not competitive anyway, or just kind of bring it all along at the same time?
I guess if I'm picking for the Bears, I would rather have them try and build a defense as well. Or do that first and then see, okay, we're going to come along on offense. So I guess the way that they're doing it is the right way that I would have gone, in part because I think that the Bears are one of those places, and you know this, obviously, that you need to have a defense in Chicago because of the way that people are and how the fan base is. Like I just don't know how well, even if they would have still been losing anyway. But if you're losing and it's, 42-40, but you look pretty on offense, but the defense really stinks, I actually think that would have ramped up the pressure on the coach in the front office even more. So yeah,
and Justin Fields for that matter. I think that can mess the quarterback up. So like I said, it's not sexy, but I think they're doing it right. Okay. Or I'm trying to convince myself of that.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, yeah, one of the two. We'll see. I don't know. We might be in agreement. We might be in agreement on that, though. But every week we end the show with my favorite segment, Put Them on Blast, where we put someone on blast for something that they did or said. I have been anxiously awaiting to see who Carmen is going to put on blast this week. So you're going to go first. Who are you putting on blast, Carmen?
Put them on blast.
I am putting on blast multiple major news outlets, or supposed to be news outlets, that cannot get the right picture on their photos that are supposed to be Todd Bowles. I have seen Keith Armstrong, who is the Bucs special teams coordinator. I have seen Casey Rogers, who is in fact the defensive line coach who will be sharing defensive coordinator duties. And this was on the LA Times first. It was on Pro Football Talk, which Pro Football Talk is affiliated with Peter King, who broke the story in the beginning. So, and then I just saw Sports Illustrated did the same thing, and Albert Breer with Monday Morning Quarterback it was a picture of Casey Rogers, and I'm like, guys, come on, you got to be better than that. There's no excuse for it. You search a photo, I don't care if it's mislabeled, it pops up with 20 other photos. Does that photo match the guy that's in all 20 other photos? I don't know. If it doesn't, maybe that's not the right photo, or maybe that's not the right guy, or maybe you just need to double check and do a Google search. It's not really that hard. And I was so heated last night because, listen, also, Todd Bowles is a head coach in this league. He has been a head coach in this league before. He was a defensive coordinator on a Super Bowl winning team in the last 2 years. He is not a nobody. You should know who this man is if you are covering this league. Show that man the respect he deserves. Put the right photo up.
So also, because this is my show, I can say this, that it also had some they all look alike vibes to it. And so we also,
I mean, I'm not the one that's going to say that.
Yeah, it's fine. I would have said it for you. Yeah. So
but it does have got a little bit of a
a little bit of that. Also, as you were saying that, it also made me think of this. They could just look at the team website.
Website. Google.
Has to be
like I said,
on the team website.
When Florio responded to me when I tagged him in this, I tagged all of them in my little post that were like, guys, get it together because I'm not shying away from this. There's no excuse for it. He was like, oh, we use 2 different photo services and sometimes they mislabel them and yada yada yada. I'm like, I don't care. We all use the same photo services. I use the USA Today photo service. Again, that photo is not the only photo that's popping up. It's popping up with 15, 20 other photos on a single page that you can easily cross-reference. And then again, like I said, if you are covering this league, you should know what Todd Bowles looks like.
Solid. I mean, there's really nothing.
I'm ready to throw hands, Greg.
I see that. We've gotten you fired up all over again. And it's okay. So we're just going to end with you on talking, making you get fired up about the Bears and the Todd Bowles situation.
I know my blood pressure is through the roof.
Yeah, it's fine. Now, who I'm going to put on blast is actually Brian Cashman, the general manager of the New York Yankees, who, listen, we talk about teams that no one's going to feel sorry for. It doesn't really matter what's going on. You're just not going to feel sorry for the Yankees. But he had this to say today recently about the Houston Astros and kind of their situation with how they got caught cheating. He had this to say. Quote, the only thing that stopped us was something that was so illegal and horrific. Cashman said this in comments to The Athletic. So I get offended when I start hearing that we haven't been to the World Series since 2009 because I'm like, well, I think we actually did it the right way. We pulled it down, we brought it back up, drafted well, traded well, developed well, signed well. The only thing that derailed us was a cheating circumstance that threw us off. Hey, man, you can't be the person. Yeah, the tiny violin.
I'm playing the world's smallest violin for you.
Brian, you can't be the GM of the Yankees complaining like this. It can't be we literally, the evil empire, that whole phrase and how it's now morphed into other teams get called that. The Red Sox got called that a little bit after they started basically buying everybody up as free agents. You can't be the one to complain about this. Let other teams do it. I'm not even sitting here defending the Astros. I don't particularly care for them either.
No,
but you just can't be the one doing it, Brian Cashman. For all you have to go on blast for that.
especially when you're a team that like doesn't pay attention to the cap like at all. Like you have no
Right.
problem spending over the cap and spending and getting these guys and building up a talented roster that you should easily be able to win with, especially in the biggest market in the country by arguably the most high profile franchise in the league. So
Yeah, we probably
you're right.
shouldn't be calling attention to the fact that they have not. I don't think they haven't won a World Series since like the iPad was invented. Like we probably shouldn't be like calling attention to that, right? Like just given all the
I think
advantages that they have.
what excuse do they have? They have all the resources. They have everything that they need to win. If they're not winning, there's some other issues going on there. So whatever.
Yeah, kind of like my Lakers. Like I almost made it through a pod without slandering my own team. Like I almost did it. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. That could be a whole nother hour. We would not do that because God, they're frustrating me. I can't watch the games right now. But that is going to do it for us this week. Subscribe to the podcast everywhere you listen to them. Rate us and leave us a 5-star review. If you only leave 4, I'm inclined to think you're a hater and nobody wants that. Make sure you're checking out the other podcasts on the Hill Varsity Network, the Mind Your Own podcast, Varsity Club, Nebraska Post Press Game Show, and the Hill Varsity Radio Show. You can also check out the Hill Varsity YouTube page. I am back on there with another recruiting question of the week video. You can get after us on Twitter at Greg Smith HB and at Carmi V. Carmen, thank you so much for being on this week. We will catch you guys again later.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.